Hello folks, my name is Marco Landry and today I'm going to be documenting the process of replacing your OEM bleeder valves with some speed bleeder valves. So the speed bleeder valves will really simplify the process of flushing the brake fluid from your bike. And these speed bleeder valves are available for pretty much all type of bikes, even all types of car, and it really simplifies the process of flushing the fluid from your bike or from your car. So you no longer need one person that is pumping the brakes while your person is cracking the bleeder valve open. You can do all of this by yourself with a lot less headaches and a lot less risk of introducing some air bubbles into your brake lines. And having said that, if that's something of interest and you want to understand how to simplify the process of changing the brake fluid on your bike with those speed bleeder valves, stay tuned and we'll get started right now. So in order to change the speed bleeder valves on your bike, it's going to be fairly easy. You don't need a lot of tools. You will need some wrenches. If you have a Japanese or European bike, you will need some metric wrenches to remove the bleeder valves. And when you install the speed bleeder valves, they are non-metric or SAE, so you will need some SAE wrenches in order to install these units back. The other thing you will need as well is either a piece of tubing with a bottle, a plastic bottle or container to push the fluid or capture the fluid once you push it out. In this case as well, you can also get a bag from speed bleeder valves, so you can connect that tubing on that bag, and when you are flushing the system, the liquid will be captured in this bag. So that's one option. The second option is that you can use a Mighty bag. I'm used to working with this and I love it, so I'll use this to capture the fluid. The other thing that could be helpful as well, if you are unsure on what type of speed bleeder valves you need for your bike, you can remove your valves from your bike, and by using one of these little gauge here, you can determine the size of your bolt, and after that you can also determine the tread or the pitch, I should say. So in this case, I think it's going to be 1. So you can see here, I'm not sure the camera will capture this properly, but you can see here the pitch is a 1.0 pitch, and the size was the M10. And you can also measure if you wanted to, so that when you call the folks at Speed Bleeder, you can tell them the length of the treaded area versus the non-treaded area. That's something that is very helpful. You can use this type of gauge to determine the proper sizing of bleeder valves that you will need. So one other note that's of interest here is that with the speed bleeder valve, you will see here the gray part is some tread sealant, and you can actually order some extra tread sealant from Speed Bleeder. So after a while, after putting this on and off for a couple of years, you can reapply some tread sealant to make sure that you have a good and solid seal between your caliper and your bleeder valve. So one thing I forgot to mention, I was just about to set up and start doing some work on the bike and show you how to do this, but there's one thing that's very, very important here. On the Speed Bleeder website, they mention in the installation instruction that after you remove your OEM valves, you can discard them. I would strongly advise not to discard your OEM valves or bleeder valves, because if your system is not prime or there's no fluid in your brake line, it will be almost impossible to reintroduce fluid by simply having the speed bleeder valve. So the speed bleeder valve is going to be ideal when there's already some fluid in the brake line. And you'll see in a few minutes that I'm not going to flush the full system. I'm actually going to keep the fluid in the master I'm going to remove one valve and put the speed bleeder valve, do it on the other side, do it at the master, and after that I'll start flushing the system by pumping the brakes. But if you empty everything and you introduce one of these, it's going to be a nightmare. So please keep this in mind when you are doing this work. So having said that, I've spoke way too much as usual. So let's go over to the bike and I'll show you how to install these speed bleeder valves. Okay, so we are now ready to swap that OEM bleeder valve with a speed bleeder valve. So in order to do so, make sure that this caliper is clean. Also make sure that you have a lot of shop towel or paper towel, because if you have any brake fluid that goes on your paint, it can be very, very bad for your paint. So if it does, make sure that you clean it as quickly as possible. So this area is fairly clean now. The next thing that you need to do is to remove the bleed nipple cap here. So this little cap, remove it, and just make sure that you wipe this, make sure there's no liquid on your bleeder valve. And then I'm going to use a wrench, and I believe here in this case it's the 8mm wrench. So I'm going to put this close by, and I'm going to make sure I have plenty of rags or shop towels or paper towel. I can't even speak anymore. So now I'm gonna crack this open slowly and make sure that the rag stays there, and you quickly remove it. And I'm just gonna keep the rag or my thumb on it, and it's actually, so I don't think I have the right size. It looks a bit smaller, so what they sent me is definitely smaller than what it should be. So I'm going to put it back on, and I'll have to make a few phone calls and order a new unit as quickly as possible, I guess. That's disappointing. It's very disappointing. So needless to say that I'm not very impressed that I have the wrong size of speed bleeder valve for the caliper. However, I'm pretty sure that the one for the master will be fine. So this is for the clutch side here, and I believe this one is M10x1. So I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to try to install the M10x1. So the M10x1 is this one here, and you can see in the back the model number. And this is what it looks like. So I'm going to take this off, and we'll see if we're going to be more lucky with this one. So same process again. I'm going to make sure that there's some paper towel around this here, and that I don't damage the paint. So I'm just going to remove that bleed nipple cap here, and make sure everything is clean around that surface. And then I'm going to use my 11mm wrench here, and I'm going to have the other valve ready to go so that there's not too much liquid that's going to fall off. So we're going to be ready to remove this and insert the other one as quickly as possible. So actually there's no liquid coming out of this one, which is good. It makes my life a bit easier. And we're gonna insert this one, make sure that we don't cross thread it. And this one's gonna be super tight because of that thread sealant on there. And you will need a 7/16 wrench in order to reassemble or to secure this in place, and this one definitely fits properly. And when you do this, again, you don't want to go super fast because you want to make sure that it is properly threaded, and that you don't cross thread this. And don't go super tight. Once you are hitting the bottom spot, just go an extra maybe 1/8 of a turn, and that should be more than sufficient. So here we go, and that's it. So this is what it looks like now, and you will also have one of these little caps here. So I'm going to insert that little cap on this. I'm not going to drain this now because there's no value in doing a flush now. I'll do it once I get the other bleeding valves, or the other speed bleeder valves. Okay, so now I'm on the brake side. So the process will be the same. I'm just going to remove that nipple here and clean everything around it. Make sure there's no dirt that will go in once we remove that valve. And I'm going to use a clean piece of paper here and just put this on top. Make sure that I don't damage the paint or nothing drips on the paint. And I'm going to make sure that I have my new unit handy and close by so that I can switch it quickly. And I'm going to use the 11mm wrench to loosen this up here. And now I can remove it with my fingers. Nothing should flow over, but I have an extra piece of paper towel just in case. And now we will insert the speed bleeder valve. Make sure there's no paper going in, and again, make sure you don't cross thread this this nut here. And I'm going to use a 7/16 wrench to secure this in place here. So you can see it's fairly easy if you have the right size of valves or the bleeder screws. So now that this one is done, I'm going to look at the size of the rear caliper and see if I have something that will fit on there. And then I'll go and order the right size of for the front caliper. Put a little nipple cap on for now. So I was not planning on replacing this this valve here for the clutch sleeve initially, but since I'm going to reorder a replacement for the wrong units, I'm going to look at that size here and see if I can get something that would go there, because that's definitely going to make the process easier. And that's going to be a messy one here. You can see the liquid coming out already. And this one might actually be the M6x1. So we're going to give it a try and see if that's going to work. So I'm just going to put it there for now. With that sealant, it stopped that flow of fluid from coming out almost instantly, and it's threading in properly. But before I thread too far, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up this little valve that I just removed, and I'm going to look at the threads here. So you can see here that the pitch is a 1.0 pitch. Not sure if the camera will get this properly here with that angle, but this is the speed bleeder valve. It's also a 1.0 pitch, and the length is 1.5, and the length for the OEM is a bit shorter than 1.5. No, actually it's 1.5 as well. So the threaded area here you can see is 1.5, This one is also 1.5. At least I'll be able to reuse this one. That's definitely going to make the process of flushing that liquid for the clutch a lot easier as well. So this one, the wrench will be a 1/4 inch, and you want to also hold the nut below, and the nut below is metric and it's 12 millimeters. So I'm just gonna give this a little bit of a pressure here to make sure it's nice and solid, and here we go. And again, I'm not going to flush any of this now. I'm going to wait until I get the bleeder valves for the calipers. So I'm going to put that nipple back on it here. Now, the moment of truth, see if the rear caliper is in fact an M10x1. So I have one remaining unit here. This is the M10x1. You can see the back, the M10x1 and the model number, which I will also provide in the description below. But this unit should fit here. So let's give this a try here. So you won't be able to see much, but I'll add a few pictures. The caliper is right under the wheel, and I'm too lazy to remove the wheel at this point because I'll have to put the bike away in a few minutes. But I'm gonna use, I believe, the 11 mil wrench here. And same process as earlier. You know, we're gonna put some paper towel on the wheel here. Make sure that we don't have anything dripping on the wheel. Take the 11 millimeter wrench and keep my finger crossed at the same time to make sure that that's gonna fit. All right, so now manage to crack it open. The liquid is already flowing. I'm gonna keep this close by here, and we're gonna see how quickly I can make this happen here. So I'm gonna unscrew this and put this aside, take the new one, and start threading it right away. Here we go. This is the 7/16 wrench. So this one is a bit more tedious here because there's not a lot of room to maneuver with the wrench. I could have used just a socket as well, I presume, but that's gonna eventually make its way through here. And the reason why I'm not gonna change the fluid now is because it's hygroscopic and it attracts moisture and water, so I'd rather wait until I have the 2 speed bleeder valves for the front caliper before I start replacing that brake fluid and also the clutch fluid as well at the same time. So I'll do all of this in one go, and this way my fluid will be nice and fresh. All right, so here we go. So now it's nice and solid, and here we go. So put that little nipple on it again. All right, folks, I'm back. I finally got the bleeder valves. It's been about a week and a half right now. I've just been busy, so here I am, all set to go and finish the installation of these speed bleeder valves on the front calipers. So this model is the SB8125L. So it's M8 by 1.25, and it's a 5/16 wrench to install. So I'm gonna add this in the description below, but these are the details for these bleeder valves. So without any further ado, I'm gonna crack this open and replace this valve on the left side. I'll do the same thing on the right side as well, and after that we can do a full flush of the brake fluid in the front, the back, and also for the clutch line as well. All right, folks, so this is again on the left hand side. I'm going to remove this for the front caliper, or the bleeder valve for the front caliper, I should say. I'm going to open this up now as well to make sure that it's quick and easy to replace. So I'll remove this one, plug this one in, and after that I'll do the other side. I'm removing this now. It's already leaking a bit. I'm going to put this on the side here, and I'll plug in the new one right away. And make sure that this is properly threaded as well, that you don't cross thread any of this. You will feel a little bit of resistance because obviously this sealer on those valves make it a bit more difficult to thread, but once you are started, it's fairly easy to complete the process. And I know I mentioned this before, but with the speed bleeder valves, all the valves are SAE and not metric. So just be aware of this when you are working with this, that you will need some SAE wrenches. So I'm not going to go super tight because I'm going to reopen it again in a few minutes here. All right, so this side is done. I'm not going to put the little dust cap right away. I'll wait for a bit. Actually, I'm not going to put it all the way. I'm just going to put it on top here to make sure I don't lose it, because I'm known to lose things very quickly. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm not going to record this portion because you've seen enough of the replacement for these valves now. But once this is done, we will start flushing the fluid. So now that the valves have been all replaced, you want to make sure that there is enough brake fluid in your reservoir and also in the reservoir for the clutch. So the brake and the clutch, you want to make sure that there's enough liquid in them. And after that, we will start flushing the system a few times to make sure that we replace all the fluids in the line with some brand new fluid. And now I'll be good for the rest of the year. So the first step to do so is that I'm simply going to move this like this. You could also remove the bodywork if you wanted to, but it's quite doable without removing it. So I'm going to take some shop towels again, and I'm going to cover everything. And I know I'm repeating myself, but you want to make sure that none of that brake fluid will go on your paint. So I'm going to remove those two Phillips screws here from the reservoir, and we will remove the cap, make sure it's full, and then I'll start flushing the lines a few times. So the liquid is a bit low here, and I'm going to flush it a few times obviously. So I'm going to retop this, and after that we will start flushing the lines. Okay folks, so I am now ready to start flushing the brake fluid. In my case, I'm using the RBF 600 for the Ducati, and for my track bike, I'm using the RBF 660. And the difference between the two is that the RBF 600 has a lower dry boiling point and a slightly higher wet boiling point. I'm not going to go into the details. I'm not going to start any arguments. This is religion for certain people. In my case, I've been using these products for years. I love this one for the road, and I love this one for the track. This is my personal preference. You do what you feel is right, but in either case, you need to make sure that you have some DOT4 fluid for your bike. This is a brand new bottle. Normally, when I get it, I just take a little Sharpie and I'll write the date on the cap. So this way, if I need to top it off in a few weeks or a month, I know exactly when that bottle has been opened. Normally, I don't keep this for very long because it attracts moisture, it attracts water. So you want to make sure that once this is open, you don't keep it for a long period of time. And this is also the reason why you want to flush your fluid on your bike on a regular basis. So today is the 17th of May, or the 17th of June, So I'm just going to say June 17, 2022. And if I use the full bottle, then I don't have to worry about it. But if I don't, I can keep it with my other chemicals, and I'll know exactly when that bottle is open. So the other thing as well that I like to do when I open a bottle like this is that I'm not going to remove that foil or that seal. I'm just going to take something sharp, and I'm going to puncture 2 holes, one at the top and one at the bottom. And this way it's a bit easier to manage the flow of the liquid when you're pouring your liquid into your brake reservoir. Again, personal preference. If you don't like this, if you're not happy about this, do whatever you want. To me, this is the best way of doing it because it allows me to pour very accurately in some tight spaces. So that's why I do this. And we are now equipped to do the fluid top off and then the flush. All right, so now that we are ready to go, I'm simply gonna take some shop towels again, take my bottle of RBF 600, open this up here, and be very careful not to drip anything. And I'm gonna add some brake fluid in here. I won't go with a full reservoir, but close to full. And now we will go down at the caliper level, and I'll start flushing the brake fluid. So I'm now ready to start flushing the fluid from the lines. Normally what you want to do is start from the line the further away from your reservoir. So in this case, I'm going to remove that nipple that I put this temporarily earlier, or that dust cap, and I'm going to use my Mighty-Vac, and I'm going to connect the end on that bleed nipple or that bleeding valve, and I'm going to put my wrench underneath it, and I'm going to apply a bit of pressure, or suction I should say. So now I have some suction in there, and I'm going to open that valve just a little bit. And now we will start the bleeding process, and this is where the magic happens. You simply need to press on the brake lever, and now the brake fluid should start flowing. So now I can see the brake fluid flowing, and I'm going to do this for the full amount of the reservoir. So I'm keeping an eye on the reservoir. I'm keeping an eye here as well to make sure there's no fluid going or leaking from my adapter here. And I keep pumping the brakes, and I'm not going to go right at the bottom of the reservoir, but probably 1/8 of the reservoir will be left. Make sure that we don't introduce any air in the system. Here we go. So we're going to retighten this again, and now that it's nice and secure, I'm going to take a bit of shop towel here and remove that hose. Make sure that nothing going onto the bike or the paint or the wheels or this. If something drips, then we're obviously just going to wipe it clean. I'm going to secure this again, and we are done for this side here. So now I'm going to reposition on the other side, and we will start the same process again. Flush it once, and you can see quickly that I've managed to pull quite a bit of fluid from there. So this is my old fluid, and you can tell that it was very easy. I was able to do this myself without having to close the valve and then pump and then open the valve, pump again, and just repeat the process. It's so much easier with those bleeding valves. It's a super easy process. It takes minutes to do a full flush of your lines. Now I'm gonna top off the reservoir again. So you can see here that my reservoir is almost empty, just a bit of liquid left, and again we'll top this up and we'll start that process on the other side. So as you can tell, this is not super complex. Just need to make sure that you have the proper tools the proper chemicals or the proper fluid, and it's a fairly simple process. So I'm going to top this up again. I won't go right to the edge because I don't want anything to drip when I'm moving the handlebars. And we will do a full flush on the line on the right side of the bike. So I don't think there's any need for me to tape all of this again. You understand the process, so I'll drain this line. After that, I'll show you how to do the master cylinder as well. Okay, so now I'm gonna do the master, and this is where it's almost easier to do this with two person, just because you need to hold your reservoir here. So I'm gonna plug this in here. I'm gonna apply a bit of suction, and it doesn't help when you're shaking either. Okay, so a bit of suction here, and I'm gonna hold the device with my legs here, crack this open here a bit, and this is a 7/16 wrench here, so you need a different wrench for this one. My reservoir is already full here, and I'm going to start pumping, and we should see the liquid coming out in a minute here, hopefully. And it is coming down here. You can see it on this pipe here, there's a bit of fluid coming through. I know it's not very easy to see, but I'm keeping an eye on my reservoir as well. It's almost empty now. Maybe one more pump or two more pumps, and then we're going to resecure that valve in place and take a piece of shop towel and remove this, making sure nothing leaks. And that's it, folks. We have done the full line with the 3 valves on the front of the bike for the front brakes. And now, before completing the process, obviously you want to re-top the fluid in your reservoir. So we're gonna add a bit more fluid here, and I'm gonna go just below the line, maybe a smidgen more. Here we go. And the last step will be to add the cap back on. And normally, before I do this, I take that little rubber thing here, and I'll clean this up before I reintroduce this in there to make sure there's no humidity or old brake fluid that is still on there. And once this is done, we will reposition this properly and make sure that the liquid level is okay. And I think it's fine like this. And now we will take the cap with the 2 screws and push this in very gently here. Oops. Probably better if I align it properly here. There we go. And with that Phillips screwdriver, I'm gonna screw this back in place here. Okay, so we are now positioned at the slave, and the way this is working obviously is that when you press on the clutch, the fluid is being compressed, and there's a rod here that will disengage the clutch, and that rod is just being pushed across by the fluid in this slave. So because your DOT4 fluid is hygroscopic, meaning that it attracts moisture and water, you want to make sure that you replace the fluid in this line on a regular basis to make sure that your clutch is behaving properly. So in order to flush this, it's going to be very similar to earlier. However, because there is the brake line coming here that's being held in place by a banjo bolt, I'm going to use a 12 millimeter wrench to hold that banjo bolt. And then on top of this, you have your speed bleeder. And I'm gonna connect my hose here on top of this and apply a bit of suction to that hose. And then I'm gonna crack this open, and then we are gonna pump the clutch very slowly, and the liquid should start coming out. So I think this one is a bit smaller, that bleeder valve is a bit smaller, and my receptacle here might be a bit too big, so I'll try to push it a bit further down without the wrenches, and then I'll apply some suction. So I'm pumping the clutch lever, I can see the fluid coming out. Pumping 3 times so far, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, and now it's not leaking, which is a bit better. I'm going to apply a bit more suction, and I'm going to remove this for now, put it on the side, wipe this up. And you see, this is really the beauty of having this type of bleeder valve, because it's so much easier. You can remove your receptacle or your hose there, and or your Mighty Vac in my case, and there's no air being introduced, and the fluid is not coming out. So the way it's working basically is that you have a check valve, and the check valve is opening up when you're applying pressure, and it's opening up, allowing the liquid to flow out. But the liquid can't flow back in, and neither can the air. So this is super great concept, and as you can tell, it really makes the process a lot easier. So I'm gonna stop talking here, and I'm gonna add a bit more fluid one more time, and we're gonna flush this once more. So I have my fluid, I'm gonna top up my reservoir, and the liquid is a much nicer color now as well. It's super light, it's super bright, so that's definitely what you want to see. Okay, so we're going to do this once more. I'm going to plug my Mighty Vac here, apply some suction, and now I have some suction in, my reservoir is full. And now I'm going to pump the clutch lever a few times. And I know you can't see from there, but when I'm pumping, I can see that my reservoir, or the liquid in the reservoir, is going down. So I'm going to pump a few more times and make sure that you don't introduce any air. So I'm going to pump a few more times here. And now it's almost empty. I'm gonna remove this again here, make sure it doesn't leak, and we're gonna top it up one last time, and then we should be good to go. All right, so now I think we're good. I'm gonna remove this, and I'm gonna secure this back in place. And again, you don't have to go super tight with this. Just a bit of pressure, and it should be good enough. Okay, so the next step here will be to flush the master for the clutch side. And I'm going to crack this open just a little bit here and use my paper towel as I did earlier. Just put it here, connect this on here, apply some suction on my Mighty Vac, and I'm going to open this just a little bit more here, and then I'm going to pump underneath here. You can barely see it, but I'm just going to pump the clutch, and you can see the fluid flowing. Well, I guess you can't see it here, but the fluid is flowing through, and you can see that the reservoir is going down. I'm just going to do this once, because I don't think there's a lot left that needs to be flush. And once this is done, I'm going to remove my Mighty Vac, wipe everything properly, And once this is done here, the next step will be to re-secure this or tighten this again. And again, just make sure that this is not super tight, but tight enough. And now what I'm going to do next is to add the .4 fluid or the RBF 600 again. And I want to go right to the edge. Obviously, you want to leave some room. And the next step will be to make sure that your little cap here is properly clean. So once this is clean, we can just put it back into that reservoir and then use the plastic cap to go on top. And then, just as a good measure, I'm going to take some cleaning material here and just clean up everything, the reservoir, the lever, and everything around that bleeding valve here to make sure there's no fluid that remains there. And that's it, guys. This is the process to flush the fluid for your master and your slave for the clutch line. Alright guys, so I'm at the last step of the process, which is the rear brake. And it's a little bit more challenging just because of the way that the rear caliper has been designed or engineered. So it's always a pain in the butt to do it when you're bleeding it normally with the regular valves. But I'm assuming now that because I'm not going to flush the line, it should be fairly easy. So we'll give it a try and see how it's going to go. But whatever you do, make sure that you don't let your reservoir go empty. Alright, so the first step that you want to do is make sure that your reservoir is full, as I mentioned. So we're going to open this up on the right side of the bike. And I'm going to carefully remove that seal. And I'll clean this up in a few minutes. And it's a bit low because when I remove the bleeder valve from the caliper, there's a bit of fluid that leaked out. So I'm going to top it up again, and I'll reposition the camera on your side so that we can flush the lines like we did in front. And I sound a bit distracted right now. It's because it started raining super hard, and lightning and thunder, so just crazy. You can see here, hopefully you can see the rain, and some kids were stuck in the rain walking and screaming, so it kind of took me off guard here a bit, and I got a bit distracted. So I'm going to top this up, and this is where having those two holes in my container here in that foil really makes that process a lot easier. So to flush this here, what I'm going to do is crack that valve open. I'll just open it by probably a quarter turn, and I'm going to connect my hose on it and apply a bit of suction to it. So I'm going to hold this in place, reposition myself on the other side so I can see the reservoir, and I'm going to just pump the brakes a bit here and see if there's liquid coming out. So this is a little bit of a yoga exercise here, so I'm just pumping the brakes and holding the hose on the bleed nipple on the other side and keeping an eye on this while doing all of that. Add a bit more fluid. And I'm also keeping an eye on the other side to make sure that there's no fluid dripping onto the wheel itself. So it's starting to look a little bit clearer. And as I mentioned earlier, whatever you do, do not introduce air in that circuit because you will be swearing. This is always a super difficult line to bleed. All right, so now that this is all done, I'm going to remove that hose. And I'm going to put this aside for now. Wipe this properly here, make sure nothing's dirty or there's no brake fluid. I'm just resecuring now that bleeder valve. Clean up the tip here. Make sure that there's no fluid left. Okay, as a next step now, I'm just going to press the brake a few times and then make sure that your wheel is not turning when you press on the brake. So this is good here, and that's working properly. All right, folks, that's the process to install the speed bleeder valves on a Ducati 848 Evo. The process will be pretty similar for all type of other bikes. And really the advantage of this now is that you can bleed your brake lines, your clutch line by yourself in a matter of minutes. So typically it takes me about 15 minutes to do the full bike, and I can do all of this by myself. So super useful, very inexpensive modification, and you will benefit greatly, and it's a lot more pleasant to do this work. Hopefully that was helpful. If it was, please smash that like button or subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please post them below or reach out to me on social media. And until next time, stay safe, ride safe, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.